U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Israeli President Isaac Herzog to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is on trial for corruption, during an address to the Israeli parliament in Jerusalem. Netanyahu was indicted in 2019 in 3 cases, one of which includes receiving almost $210,000 in gifts from businessmen, including champagne and cigars. Israel's president holds a largely ceremonial role, but he does have authority to pardon convicted criminal if there are unusual circumstances presented. However, there has been no ruling in Netanyahu's long-running trial, which began in 2020 and has been interrupted frequently during 2 years of war and Middle East upheaval. He has pleaded not guilty and denied any wrongdoing. For more on this, I'm joined by our senior international correspondent and anchor, Afua Hagan. Afua, can you tell us what's the latest on the hostages that were released earlier on today?
We've had really emotional scenes of Israeli hostages. All 20 have been freed now back to their families. And of course, Palestinian hostages, captives and prisoners have been released also, 1,900 of them going back to their families. So emotional scenes on both sides of people being reunited with their families after being in captivity during the 2 years of war that you mentioned there, Judith. Also, today we had President Trump addressing the Israeli parliament today. That's when he was urging the Israeli president to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but he was certainly received with a hero's welcome in the Israeli parliament, with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that President Trump is the best friend that Israel has ever had. An almost an hour speech that President Trump gave there at the Israeli parliament, saying that nobody is at war anymore, never forget and never again, referring to the October 7th attacks, saying that so many people thought that Israel became strong and powerful, and that's what led to peace. He said that Israel won all they can, and now it's time for peace in the entire Middle East. He also talked about Iran, saying that there's space for Iran to be welcomed to the table, but they must never have nuclear weapons. It's quite a long speech, like I said, almost an hour, given by President Trump to the Israeli parliament earlier on. Now he has gone to that peace summit, which is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Well, we'll see what well, Trump is in Egypt with various world leaders at the so-called peace summit that you just described here. What can we expect to hear from there today?
That's right. Trump was actually probably about 2 hours late for leaving for that peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh because of the length of his speech and other speeches that took place in the Israeli parliament. Up to 20 world leaders are going to be in attendance, including France's President Macron, UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Iranian leaders won't be in attendance. Prime Minister Netanyahu won't be in attendance also because of the proximity to a Jewish holiday. That's where we can expect Trump to further proclaim that peace has come to the Middle East, potential of signing some sort of peace deal there as well. But what I think we can expect is more of this kind of fanfare, and the fanfare of Donald Trump and the United States is kind of the savior of the so-called Middle East, the savior of the Gulf region, and the savior of Israel. Interesting, like I said, that both the Israeli and the Iranian leaders won't be present. Does that mean it's largely symbolic? And will we get any actual deals done? We're now moving into the second phase of this ceasefire. So what does that mean, and how will that get started?
And what happens next for Gaza? What happens in Gaza next?
Well, yes, like I said, second phase of the ceasefire. We've had more aid going into Gaza, gas for cooking, more aid supplies, more food supplies moving into the region as well, which is obviously incredible for people who have survived for so long with almost nothing. But like I say, the second phase of the ceasefire will include IDF soldiers moving back to a certain point in Gaza. Where will that point be? That has to be decided. Will Hamas fighters be allowed to lay down arms and leave the region also? Will we have Israeli troops and IDF soldiers pulling out completely? We've never gotten to the second phase of the ceasefire. It's always been broken after the prisoner exchange. And now all the prisoners are free, although we still don't have the remains of all the prisoners who died. We have the 20 alive hostages. We've got bodies, remains of 5 coming back today, and that leaves around 23 that we do not have back yet. So that has to be completed. But we've never got past this phase 1. So what happens in phase 2? That's when you have troops withdrawing. And can either side get to phase 2? Can either side be trusted to get to the point where we move forwards towards peace? Perhaps that's what will be discussed at this peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Let's see what comes out of it today. Afua, thank you. Afua Hagan, our senior international correspondent and anchor there with insight from the Gaza, as well as the peace talks happening today in Egypt.